Hi, welcome to the Cinnafilm Coffee Break webinar. We're going to be talking about creating great progressive images during this webinar. So one of the things we're going to be talking about today, primarily to create these great progressive looking images, is going to be Tachyon. And it's highlighted here. Cinnafilm makes a lot of award-winning image processing software. Tachyon is our focus today, and Tachyon's available in many enterprise-grade transcoding platforms. We have other technologies, DarkEnergy and WormHole, but those will be on other coffee breaks. Mentioned enterprise-grade transcoders. Radiant Grid is our own enterprise-grade transcoder. And then we also have the technology in PixelStrings, which we will be showing the demonstration and the usage of Tachyon in PixelStrings, which is our platform as a service that resides in the cloud. Okay, so let's talk really quick about broadcast television, which is where most of the 2997i is going to be generated for. And, you know, a lot of times 2997i broadcast television is taken for granted. You know, everything just seems to work. It doesn't matter what the editors have put together. They put it together and they put it over the airwaves, and all the televisions, all the set-top boxes know exactly what to do with it, and life is great. But then when you need to repurpose that content into a different type of delivery medium, such as over the top or YouTube, or, well, I guess over the top, YouTube is over the top, but you want to use this other model that cell phones, computers, tablets, they don't have these deinterlacers and these inverse telecine engines inside them. So the images have to be progressive. And so the question is, while everything worked great for broadcast television, what's actually underneath the covers? And, you know, I have a few titles up here, and you know, some of these shows are 2997i. They're true interlace shows. A lot of Saturday Night Live is, and some of the last week. But a lot of this stuff originated at 23976. Why? Because it's a filmic look, and it is more, it's a better format for telling stories, because our eyes are trained for storytelling to be at a 23 or 24 frame per second frame rate. When you go to the movies, it's 24 frames per second. That's just what we've been programmed to receive. And almost every DP and every director says, we have this episodic television show, we have this drama, whatever it is, we want to shoot it at 2398. So how do they get the 2398 into 2997i? Well, there's two popular patterns that convert 23976 to 2997i. Now, both these patterns are easily removed if you don't do anything to them. You just basically turn on an inverse telecine engine, and it will go in and remove the pattern. Well, what's the pattern? Here I have 4 frames. This is the original 23976p. It's frame A, frame B, frame C, and frame D. Now, in one of the popular patterns is a 5:4 ratio telecine. It's also known as 3:2 or 2:3 pull down, affectionately amongst people that do video engineering. And what we're doing is we're going to take these progressive images right here, and we're going to turn them into an interlace stream. And we're going to do that by manipulating the pattern. And the pattern is basically take frame A and put it in the upper and lower field of the first frame. Take frame B and put it into the upper and lower field. Then you take frame B again and you put it in the upper field. Frame C goes into the lower field. Frame C goes into the upper field. Frame D goes into the lower field. And then for the last 5th frame, you get frame D in top and bottom. Anytime you repeat the image in the upper and lower field, it's progressive. That's why when you look at a telecine pattern, you see 3 progressive, 2 interlaced, 3 progressive, 2 interlaced. And an inverse telecine engine that doesn't have any intelligence just basically detects that there's a pattern there, locks onto it, and just undoes the A, B, 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 C, C, D, D, D pattern. Now, not a problem at all. Another popular pattern that has come out in the last, probably 4 years is what we call a 2224 pattern. And what that refers to is how many times we're going to place this progressive frame into a field location. For frame A, we got AA, BB, CC, DD, DD. So you just repeat every 4th frame, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And if you wanted to undo this, you just remove every 4th frame, and you magically get back to 23976. So that's where this 2224 pattern comes from. You have 2 of the A, 2 of the B, 2 of the C, and then 4 of the D. Now, if that's how telecine worked in the 2997i world, we probably wouldn't be having this webinar, to be honest. But what happens is that they take these 23976 assets, they create a 2997i that's either 5/4 telecine or the 2224 pattern. And then they start editing this pattern. And so what happens is, for whatever reason, they needed to cut the cadence here and start it over. And when you look at the vast majority of episodic television that is shot at 23976 that had telecine applied, you have these broken telecine patterns absolutely everywhere. It's not an anomaly. It is the norm to have that. And now, and the other thing is that you can get a little bit you can get more extreme. And I have this title here. The title of the slide is Yet Another Nightmare. And that's when they do composites with the telecine originated material. So I have a series of frames here, and the mat, I'll call it, is set at BC up here, and the composite is on AA on the pattern. The next frame, it's on CD, so it's following the right pattern: BC, CD, DD, AA, BB, BC. That's great. And the composite is also following the pattern AA, BB, BC, CD, DD, AA. The problem is the editor did not match the cadence whenever they composited the images. Now, again, on a broadcast television, this is never noticed. Going through the set-top box, this is never noticed. But when you want to progressify the images, you have to remove this telecine pattern, and the telecine engine is going to lock on to what's the majority of the image, which is going to be the mat. And it's going to pull it down as B, C, D, A, B. The problem is that when any inverse telecine engine goes through and rips that extra field out, you're going to create combing where it was progressive. So now I have the progressive image in B, but I have residual combs in A, residual combs in B. Because of the matchup on these, they happen to both be progressive. These happen to both be progressive, but the next frame is progressive, but with combs. And that becomes a problem. Okay, so let's talk through a few examples. I've talked through the technical who's and what's of telecine and how to get rid of that to get to a progressive image. Let's look at telecine pattern removal examples. So this is a music video, which are notorious for the broken cadence and all sorts of ills when it comes to frame mechanics. This is the pixel for pixel image, and I'm going to be stretching it out using a Windows resize just so you can see a little bit more detail in the subsequent slides, but this is the original image. It just looks interlaced. It's pretty innocent, right? But let's kind of dive in and take a look. So this is the BC image in the pattern. Then we have a CD image. The next frame should be DD. That's good. We have the progressive image. Next one should be AA. That's good. Next one should be BB, but it's not BB. It's B over C. So when they did this scene transition from here to here, they didn't think about the fact that this is DD and they need to back it up one frame so that way you would have an AABB situation. They just started wherever they wanted to. And of course, they're creative people. They're designed to be creative and tell a story a certain way. Can't expect them to be held to standards of frame mechanics. One other interesting thing to notice is that there's chroma crawl here. This is a shameless DarkEnergy plug, but there's chroma crawl here, and there's a whole lot of noise in this image. That's pretty bad. Anyway, so that's the situation. This should be BB, but it's BC, and if you just keep going, there's your CD, and the pattern continues. It's correct. And if I were to just keep stepping through this, I could show you frame after frame after frame where there is going to be a break in the cadence. These videos are on Vimeo, so you can download them and take a look at them for a limited amount of time. And it's a password protected Vimeo, so if you'd like to take a look at them, please ask us for the password. Okay, so the Tachyon automated results. We did an inverse telecine. That's it. Just click the inverse telecine box. And there's a lot of intelligence that goes on under the hood to identify when those cadence breaks happen. We also did a couple of other things in this just because we can. Did a noise removal, which is the Gaussian noise as well as the chrominance noise. Did a crop to get rid of some of that BBI and everything that's going around the top, and then we up-resed it 1920 by 1080. And the next frames, these are all in pixel for pixel. So there is your progressive frame, progressive frame, progressive frame, progressive frame, progressive frame. And you notice the chrominance noise is gone. But the idea, though, is that from that busted cadence, and I'll go ahead and step through so that we can see a little bit of this in motion. again, on a broadcast television, those errors would never be seen. But on a normal inverse telecine, you would get duplicated frames, and you might even get jump cuts where you don't even have missing frames altogether because of an orphan field situation that most inverse telecine engines motion compensate a complete frame because it's an orphan field. We don't do that. We give you the true extracted 23976 video essence from that broken telecine pattern stuff. I'll step through that one more time so you can see it. Hopefully there's not too much of a lag on the GoToWebinar. Okay, here's another image. We like showing this one because there's just so much wrong with this video. Good song, but just the editing's not so great. This is the original image, and you know, just at first glance, of course, this has been stretched up by Windows a little bit. The telecine pattern, the guy in the white suit is at the BB point of the telecine pattern. The rest of the people are at the DD point. So as we step through the next frame, we have BC on the guy in the white hat, and everybody else is at AA. We have white hat guy is in CD, and everyone is in BB. Now we have that flip. White hat guy is at the DD point, whereas everyone else in the background is BC. Now this thing is not only difficult because it's composited, you also have the translucence issue going on between the images. So you can see this guy's pant leg behind this guy's jacket. You can see the outline of this guy's jacket behind the body of this man. This is an absolute nightmare for getting to a progressive image without having any residual cones. I'll just keep stepping through and you'll see how the cadence mismatch just continues through this thing. Okay, so what were the automated results that we got out of this? We have the inverse telecine turned on. We increased the detection sensitivity. That's because there is a gradual fade, and anytime you have gradual fades, the luminance will mess with the motion vector calculation. So I increased the detection sensitivity a bit, and then there's just one checkbox of that in Tachyon. Turn on residual combing removal. Had DarkEnergy, so I went ahead and turned it on. I did an up-res as well. And this is the result. Just progressive images without any residual combs anywhere. Let me step through those one more time so you can see them. And forgive the GoToWebinar. It's kind of a it's a hit and miss thing on the caching and the amount of time it takes for frames to update and get pushed out. So this video again is also on our Vimeo channel if you want to take a look at it. Okay, talked a little bit about we just talked about telecine on how they take the original progressive 23976 image, apply a pattern to it so it goes into 2997i. What if the footage is actually 2997i? Got to be able to get that to a progressive format. Now, if it's true 5994 fields, if you want to just go to 5994p, it requires a deinterlacer that has 100% vertical resolution. So basically, you lose no resolution when you take those individual fields and turn them into progressive images. The good thing about doing this is it maintains a video look. There is no motion blur because you captured it at 5994 fields per second, or if you have some, it's very, very low. And the stark contrast and the sharp motion on each frame is fully maintained. So here's a clip that we have of some vintage car racing. There is both camera panning as well as object motion in this. You'll see these are just, I'll step through the frames. They're just completely interlaced images. And I'll go ahead and I pulled 5 images out so that way you could see the resultant 10 images, 10 frames from this source 5. So there's frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you kind of look where the car is, it kind of starts right underneath this A pillar is right underneath the double E in auto weak. So here's the results. Basically, you turned on Tachyon. You don't have to set motion compensation on or anything. You just turn on Tachyon. And these are the resultant 5994p images. I'll go ahead and back up and step through them again. There's 10 images. So from the 5 original interlaced frames, we've got 10 5994p images. Okay. Sometimes though, if you have mixed mode content and you've got to go, let's take for example like a a television show like a Saturday Night Live or a John Oliver or a Bill Maher or a Dateline or any of those type of shows that you have people talking in a live broadcast environment, and then they show clips of movies or they do a little comedy skit. And oftentimes those comedy skits and those movies are always going to be, the movies are always 23976 or 24p, and then the comedy skits are often shot at 24p as well because they want the dramatic effect of the film look, right? So they apply telecine. And you have a situation where you have this 5994p and you want to normalize everything down to 24p. You don't want to take the inserted segments and upsample them to 5994. You want to take everything down to a 23976. So what this is Tachyon. That's going to take that same clip of the car that we had, and we're going to take it from 2997i or 5994 fields and take it down to 23976. Now the process in doing that is we progressify the 2997i down to up to 5994, and then we take the 5994 and motion compensate down to 23976 while inserting camera frame rate appropriate motion blur. Now that's pretty darn important, because if we don't put the motion blur in, you're going to have very choppy, very stark images that just have like a strobe effect. It's the same thing as just frame dropping. You don't frame drop to go from 5994 to 23976. If you do, it's going to be horrible to look at. So again, this is a single render. It's not a two-pass conversion in Tachyon. We do everything in one pass. And so here's the images. This is the same 5 images from before. Actually, I gave you a little bit more than 5. But you can see that the cars are blurred. The ground has some blur to it. The chain link fence has some blur to it, because we're mimicking that. If you went back to point of capture and you set your camera to 23976 instead of 2997i, this is exactly what you would get. That camera shutter speed is going to generate this level of motion blur, because that's just what 24p does. Now I'm going to compare the 5994p against the 23976 so you can just see what the difference is. Now I found the same frame that in time matched up, and so this is the 5994p frame. That's the same frame in time, because 23976 and 5994p will match up at some points. This is the same frame but with the motion blur. I'll step back so you can see it. There's the 5994, which is essentially what was captured. And this is going back in time to point of capture and turning it into 23976 with the frame rate appropriate motion blur. Back up one more time, and you can see the result of it. At first glance, you might think, well, you just wrecked the image. I tell you, if your 23976 was this sharp and had the motion gaps of 23976, this would look like almost like a strobe light, versus this would be smooth motion as it goes through. Motion blur is very important when you're going from 5994 down to 23976. And whenever you put it into Tachyon, we automatically detect that. So we call this kind of thing mixed mode. 2997i mixed mode is kind of the ultimate nightmare for frame rate conversions for going to progressive. And this is just a nonlinear edited timeline. I think this is a Sony Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. This is not accurate, but this is very much what happens in the real world. You could have an opening section that was 2224 pull down right next to a scene that is 5:4 ratio telecine, right next to another one that's 2224, next to another one that's 2224 with broken cadence. Otherwise, they just chopped off this and it was like a 2222. And then you've got some sections that are 5994 fields, and then you have a section that's 2997 PSF. I didn't even talk about that one yet. Sometimes they'll take a progressive 2997p and shove it into a 2997i container. Again, broadcast world doesn't matter. But when you have a project that has PSF in it, 2997 PSF, you have to recognize it and not do anything to it unless you're going to do a motion comp on it. But you don't need to deinterlace that, and you don't need to move telecine from this. You just need to deal with it as is, but you have to recognize it. That's the other important thing. And this last scene is 5994 fields. So essentially we have 3 different frame rates represented on this timeline. And that is the reality of mixed mode, because you have to be able to allow your editors to edit and to be creative and to use the things at their disposal to tell the story but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't expect them to also be expert frame mechanics that know how to get all of this footage normalized before they start editing. It just doesn't happen. You want the creative mind to be creative. So essentially, taking that timeline as an example, these are the different frame progressive video essences in this timeline. And Tachyon easily sorts through all of this stuff automatically when you just say allow telecine pull down removal. We'll recognize that in these first 4 scenes, that's nothing more than 23976, and we're going to extract that video essence from each one of those different scenes. We're going to recognize that 5994 fields is going to be brought into the Tachyon buffers as 5994 progressive or 2997i. Call it 5994 fields, 2997i, same thing. But it's going to become 5994 that we can deal with it. The 2997 PSF, well, that's just 2997p. Recognize it, bring it in. And then 5994 fields, again, is going to be converted to 5994 progressive images. Each one of these video essences is going to be handled differently in the motion compensation engine of Tachyon. It has to be. There's less motion here than there is here. The more motion data I have, the more I can do with the image. The less motion data I have, the more I have to be judicious with how I'm applying the motion vector data that we've collected. 2997p is kind of a middle road thing. I can go a little bit higher on frame rate, go a little bit lower on frame rate. Not much issues there. But it's something unique that you have to handle with differently. On top of that, Tachyon looks at the 23976 and splits the motion into 2 different categories. Are you what we would call normal motion, or are you considered extreme motion? Because if it's extreme motion, we have to handle you differently than if you're normal motion. We do the same thing at 5994, and we do the same thing at 2997. We look at all these things completely differently. So this point, I'm going to hand it over to Mark so he can kind of show you how easy it is to invoke these tools. I mean, I've talked about a lot of things about fixing a lot of ills, and so it might seem kind of daunting on how you actually get there, but it's actually pretty straightforward when you look at how we've put this together